This week's episode of Couch Potatoes Unite! Is sponsored by Found Penny Studio. Found Penny Studio is exclusively fulfilling our Patreon Tier 3 merchandise perk by doing what they do best, creating to celebrate everyday moments like your favorite TV series. Check out Found Penny Studio's creations at foundpennystudio.com and find Couch Potatoes Unite on Patreon at www.patreon.com/couchpotatoesunite.
You say you want to watch a drama. You say you want to watch a comedy. Well, you can watch it with your mama. Or you can watch it with your daddy. You'll even sit and watch it with your middle schooler. So you can come and talk around a water cooler. We're watching all day and all night. Couch Potatoes Unite. Whoa, whoa. Couch Potatoes Unite. Whoa, whoa. Couch Potatoes Unite.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the podcast entitled Couch Potatoes Unite! Which is based on a blog of the same name because it might not be as homespun and catchy as, say, McDonough or Roger Mac, but we get by in our new world, I think. My name is Kylie and I love TV. If you feel the same, keep listening and or checking out our website, couchpotatoesunite.wordpress.com, as you're bound to find some common ground with something you like. For Couch Potatoes Unite, we're all about the wonders and the unique long-form storytelling of the small screen. CPU! Hopes you've been following releases of brand new episodes of the podcast on Wednesdays, as well as new blog entries on some Tuesdays, and as always, we have several more new episodes on the way. Because the panels and I live lives behind our podcast, the episodes are published once per week. Subscribe to the website or the podcast via iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, via Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Amazon Music to stay on top of brand new episodes. Episodes already published discuss a variety of shows around the water cooler, including, but not limited to, Stranger Things, iZombie, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina, The Good Place, Game of Thrones, American Horror Story, Grace and Frankie, Mr. Robot, Charmed, and Riverdale. Plus, new episodes are in the works, including revisits for Doctor Who, Schitt's Creek, Westworld, Fuller House, Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, Will and Grace, Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., The Crown, Supernatural. We'll be launching new panels covering Big Little Lies, The Good Doctor, Call the Midwife, The Animaniacs, Killing Eve, and Brooklyn Nine-Nine. And because we look back at shows now past, we'll consider the moral implications and quick cancellation of Dollhouse. We'll travel through time and experience all sorts of identities with Quantum Leap. We'll thank the Golden Girls for being friends. We'll cry Bazinga for Big Bang Theory. And we'll dive deep into the fantasy world of the magicians. By the way, did you know that CPU also from time to time goes live? We've been live from bunkers, comedy shows, Comic-Cons, and game stores. Plus, we're planning more live appearances and other cool stuff, including in these semi-quarantine times. So make sure you like or follow us at our Facebook page, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, or subscribe to our website, YouTube channel, Apple iTunes channel, Stitcher Radio channel, or find us on Google Podcasts, Spotify, CastBox, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. Plus, brand new for 2021, you can now subscribe to us via Patreon. In an effort to get fancier, to upgrade some of our stuff, to build some capacity at all, Couch Potatoes Unite is on Patreon to provide the opportunity to subscribe for perks, including member-exclusive email and Discord access, bonus content, TV-themed merch, and the ability to join CPU for occasional watch parties, and in so doing, possibly to place priority requests for shows that we cover. If any of this sounds like fun to you, head on over to Patreon or download the app and search for our name, Couch Potatoes Unite! Don't forget that exclamation point. In the meantime, if you don't hear a show in this podcast format, fellow panelists and I still write reviews and we always seek new panelists, so if you have any interest in joining the discussion, say hello by finding us at any of the outlets I've mentioned. At the very least, stop by and leave us a thumbs up, comment, or review. We like feedback. Just keep your muskets and shotguns safely tucked away. No need to spark a revolution. Today we're around the water cooler and concluding our catch-up series centered on a multi-season historical drama based upon a series of novels of the same name by Diana Gabaldon. The show is Outlander, and this is the fifth of a 5-part series in which CPU catches up on this show, which airs its primary run on Premium Network Stars. In this episode, part 5 of this series, we're discussing Season 5, which aired on Stars from February 16, 2020 to May 10, 2020, with a total of 12 episodes. As a reminder, developed by Ronald D. Moore, Outlander stars Katrina Balfe as Claire Randall, a married former World War II nurse who in 1945 finds herself transported back to Scotland in 1743. There she encounters the dashing Highland warrior Jamie Fraser, played by Sam Heughan, and becomes embroiled in the Jacobite risings. In Season 5, Jamie and Claire fight to retain their home at Fraser's Ridge as the American Revolutionary War looms on the horizon. Brianna, played by Sophie Skelton, and Roger, played by Richard Rankin, get married in a big ceremony at the Ridge. During the reception, Governor Tryon further pushes Jamie to hunt down Murtagh, played by Duncan Lacroix, forcing Jamie to gather up a militia to counteract his regulators. He struggles to balance keeping his godfather safe and fulfilling his duties to the British, especially under the watchful eye of Lieutenant Knox, who is determined to find and kill Murtagh. Despite Murtagh's pleas for Jocasta, played by Maria Doyle Kennedy, to return his love for her, she moves forward with her fourth marriage, choosing the safety and security of her plantation's future over his idealism. Meanwhile, Roger and Bree's relationship is put to the test, as there are signs of Stephen Bonnet's, played by Edward Speleer's, reappearance. Further, as Claire settles on Fraser's Ridge, she continues to subvert conventional medical practices by producing penicillin and covertly providing medical advice under a pseudonym, subversive actions which produce consequences as the season progresses. The CPU Outlander panel of like-minded Sassenachs and resident couch potatoes, namely panelists Kristen, Samantha, Lori, Karen, and Anna Laura, has reconvened around the water cooler today, ready to discuss Season 5 of this wildly romantic tale of now two women who live in two different time periods and the men who would love them. Before we do, I will of course take the panel's temperature with regard to the most recent season. After all, some shows can become better or worse in our heads, or can continue their level of awesomeness or lack thereof, depending upon the story evolution. As always, it should be noted that all of our panelists have watched all episodes of this series. It's true now, to date, and may discuss sensitive plot points. So for those of you who have not watched Outlander, any of it, and plan to do so at some point, listen at your own risk, as there may be major spoilers. Welcome back, panel. How are you?
Doing great.
Hello.
Are you ready?
Very tired.
Very tired? Aw.
Work for the post office. We're putting in over 10-hour days because of Christmas, 10 to 12-hour days.
So it should be noted, as this will likely publish after Christmas, that we are recording it before the holidays. But we thank Lori and her fellow essential workers for what they do.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Lori. Are you ready to talk about the 5th season of Outlander?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Because as of today, once we've done that, we're officially caught up, ladies. Well, by we, I mean me. But the rest of you catched up with me, and that was nice. All right, so we're going to talk Season 5. Of course, what I'm going to do is take your temperature along the standard CPU character question, which changes with each show we do. I changed it a little from Season 4. There's no vast changes on this character question, because there weren't many vast changes into Season 5. We didn't get a lot of new characters. Some of the characters, unfortunately, perished in Season 4, so the list is smaller, which might be good, but now I'm going to ask you, how would you rate your interest in Outlander as of the end of Season 5? I actually have a little trepidation going into this character question, but let's see how you feel.
I'm feeling the pressure, Kylie.
Well, there's no pressure. Just listen to the character question, let it flow over you, and the answer will come. So, do you, as of Season 5, still love this show? The fantasy aspects, the romance, and the appreciation and reverence for Scotland, plus the elements of action and adventure, all of it is just so exciting, even thrilling, and nothing like you've experienced before, which is enhanced even more by the seasons set in the new world of colonial America. How could something feel so timely to the future when so much of it is set in the past? Aye, you could watch this for days, you can. Plus, the leading lady isn't hard on the eyes, like James or Jamie Mackenzie Fraser. Are you of two minds about this show? The past sweeps you off your feet unexpectedly, while the future brings with it aspects of intrigue as a mystical looking glass into the past. It's as if you're living two lives while watching this show, an experience that is full of surprises, but also offers the occasional storytelling hiccups. Still, you will persevere as you do for your love of one Jamie Fraser, like Claire Fraser? Did you start watching in earnest near the end of season 2 and were enticed by the potential of learning the explanation for how Claire gets involved in all of this to begin with, and how she comes to live the two lives, including having a child with a father who lived 200 years in the past? But now you realize that you're invested in characters and romances beyond the two main characters, in addition to everything related to the family history associated with the main characters, like Roger Wakefield and Brianna Randall. Did you start watching this show beginning with season 3, possibly because you were too young to appreciate the first 2 seasons, and are most enticed by the adventure, the sex, and perhaps, on the more innocent side, by the sense of family and the comfort that family provides, as any young adult just starting their life in the world might be, like young Ian Fraser Murray, the adult version of Claudel Fergus Fraser, or Marceline McKimmie Fraser. Though you were convinced to watch this show via nefarious or tricky means, believing it was something it wasn't, namely something that would most appeal to women, you find that it is so much more interesting and complex than for what you initially gave it credit. You're particularly taken in by Jamie Fraser's dashing good looks and seriousness of purpose, like Lord John Grey. Did you start watching in season 4 because you were more invested in and could relate more to the Brianna storylines than to anything else previously in the show? And if it wasn't for her presence as a character, you would not still be willing to watch it, like Lizzie Wemyss? Did you start watching around season 4 because you're more interested in American history and how the settlers interacted with the New World and in the history of Scotland? Plus, you're surprised and pleased by the show's willingness to show mature romances and unflinching portrayals of problematic social mores, like Jocasta Mackenzie Cameron. Did you start watching in season 4, and though, yes, you're late to this pithy and unnecessarily dangerous game, you recognize and enjoy the adventurous spirit of this show, though you could do away with all of the romance entirely. For you, the kill-or-be-killed stakes of Outlander make the whole experience surprisingly rich, especially when the villains are neither obvious nor clear, like Stephen Bonnet. Did you start watching in season 5 because you heard high tales of the action and intrigue and how loyal the show's fans are, and so you agreed to do yourself and your friends a favor by checking it out, even watching it for a time? Unfortunately, you were displeased by the suggested heresies of women changing the course of history, of men being kind to women for reasons apart from sex, and or the backcountry politics that seem to hover around lawlessness, and so you either vowed vengeance if made to keep watching, like Richard Brown, reaped what you sowed, like Lionel Brown, or got caught up in a doomed conflict around watching and likely gave up, like William or Buck Mackenzie. Are you watching the show, but the season set in America make you uncomfortable because of the inclusion of slavery and relations with indigenous peoples, no matter how delicately the show attempts to handle these topics? And so you don't know how long you can or will stay committed to watching, like Ulysses. Did you watch an episode or 2 of season 4 just to see what all the fuss was about, and in the end came away sorely disappointed, but persevered for a bit longer in season 5 to see if things would right themselves, taken in by all the fuss, as you were? But in the end, the effort you put into it for the wrong reasons got you killed, on the inside and on the outside, like Gerald Forbes? Or did your interest in the show begin to wane after watching the 3rd season, picked up again in the 4th season because you can't help but love the main characters and how much like family they are to you? Plus, stories set in the New World felt like new possibilities and new opportunities to reclaim what was lost. However, the time has come for you to admit that no matter the fact that you will feel beholden to the oath and devotion that you have for the main characters, particularly Jamie, until you die, you recognize that the show is not what it once was or what it seemed to be. Thus, you stopped watching, or perhaps it's because you, spoiler, died, like Myrta Fitzgibbons Fraser. Who would like to start?
I'll start since I had so many thoughts about breaking out the different bullet points and new characters.
Okay, bullet points.
So,
Give us a lowdown.
Oh, this is Samantha.
Hi, Samantha.
Hello. So, I believe I ended last season as a combo of Jamie and Claire and was all about it because the show is very good at setting up that cliffhanger to bring you back to being a passionate fan. And this season started out as a big dud for me. I thought it was quite tedious, and I really struggled to watch it, even not watching week to week, like marathon style. So I started the season as a Ulysses and a Gerald Forbes, I think are the best matches of what you gave us to work with. But it did redeem itself a bit for me around the time when they, unfortunately for poor Roger Mack, he got hung from a tree.
But he survived.
But he survived, yes. Not to panic, he survived because it brought the family closer together and had more of those smaller moments instead of running all over the place. So from there on out to the end of the season, I was more of a Jocasta and a young Ian. Did not redeem my Claire and Jamie status this season.
Okay.
So many feelings.
I guess. Well, welcome back, Samantha, foreshadowing.
So this is Lori.
Hi, Lori.
And I actually like this season better than season 4. I think it went back to the books a little bit more. So that would put me... See, Jamie is disconnected from Scotland now, so the descriptions kind of... I want to see a little change in the descriptions because he knows he's never going home because he's never getting back on a ship. So still Jamie Claire with a bit of Ulysses. I'm not a big fan of American history, so... we are at that point, and still I like the politics part, so that would put me with, now I gotta look it up.
So you were Jamie, Fraser, you added Ulysses because you don't like American history so much.
Yeah, I like more of European history, but that's fine. It puts me more with Murtaugh, because I actually love the character Murtaugh and his connection with history. But I'm scrolling. John Gray. I still love John Gray and his connection to all of this with the British side.
Okay. So just in terms of the character scale, I'd say then you're all over the place.
I am all over the place.
Got it. Okay. In summation.
Because then your main thing with Jamie is all about Scotland. Well, we're so removed from Scotland now in the books, with the exception of one thing, and I won't spoil it because it's not in season 5, but we don't have any ties to Scotland anymore.
He wore his tartan, so when I was looking at that description, I thought it's still in the back of his mind, the mother country, and that's why a lot of us started watching it. But I understand what you're saying.
Well, and when we maybe talk about it later, definitely up on the ridge, it's definitely Scottish hierarchy. No doubt there, but the pressures of the revolution are definitely hitting hard.
Okay. Welcome back, Lori.
Thank you.
This is Karen. I'll go next.
Hi, Karen. I'll go next.
Last season, I was more Claire. This season, I'm back to being mostly Jamie with a little bit of Claire, and funnily enough, a little bit of Murtaugh. My feelings for the series sort of follow Murtaugh's progression. Peaks in season 2, dips in season 3, starts to come back in part of season 4, but it's iffy, and then I really enjoyed season 5. It does, as Lori said, follow the books pretty more closely than season 4 did, but they do jump ahead into the next book and steal some things from the next book, and they did some very interesting made some very interesting creative choices this season that had nothing to do with the books, but the characters and their motivations and the things that happened are still more or less based on book 5. So aside from some major anachronisms, which is where I come in with Claire, I would say I'm about 75% Jamie and about 20% Claire, with just a smidge of Murtaugh in there.
Karen and her percentages. You've done that almost every time. Welcome back, Karen.
Hi, I'm Kristen.
Hi, Kristen.
Hello. So I think season 3, 4, I don't know. I think actually seasons 1 through 4, I was pretty much a Jamie and a Claire, now that I think about it. For season 5, I'm still definitely a Jamie and a Claire. I like season 5 way better than season 4. I think it's kind of writing itself. It's not quite the same level as seasons 1 and 2. Those will always be my top 2, but 5 is great. But I'm also going to add in Roger and Brianna, because I do really like watching the younger generation and their romances. I love I love Brianna and Roger's story. I love Fergus and Marcelly so much. I really loved Marcelly this season. So yeah, I'm going to throw in those 4. So Claire, Jamie, Brianna, and Roger.
Unsurprised. Welcome back, Kristen.
I play to my strengths.
You do.
Oh yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Anna Laura.
Hi, Anna Laura.
I suppose this season, I guess like a smidge of like Jamie and Claire, because there's still that like core of me that still loves this show or wants to love this show. But it's mostly, I think, a mixture of Myrta, Ulysses, and then young Ian, Fergus, and Markley. Because my feelings about the way that slavery and the treatment of Indigenous peoples from last season still stands with this season. I feel like that's about the same. So that accounts for the Ulysses. With Myrta, again, I still think that these are good characters, that this show does have strong storytelling and strong characters, but this season just doesn't really do it for me for the most part. And then with the younger generation coming in, kind of similar to Kristen, that is kind of what kept me watching when I initially watched this series when it aired earlier this year, was the family aspect of it. When the family's all together, when they're working together on stuff and they're developing the relationships between all of the family members. I think my personal favorite this season is the relationship that Markley develops with Claire as her apprentice. That's what kept me watching. So it's definitely a mixed bag for me this season.
So would it be fair to say in summation that, like Lori, you're all over the place?
I am. I'm always all over the place. I can't just be one thing.
Fair enough. Welcome back, Anna Laura. And of course, my name's Kylie. As I've mentioned, I both participate and moderate on this panel, as is often the case. I think the last time, I've mostly been Claire, and I think the last time I was a mix of Claire and Brianna and Roger because of how season 4 shaped up. I think I would still be right there. I agree that I actually like season 5 better than season 4. I think there was some streamlining that was done, which was very beneficial to the overall story arc. I'm still very much yearning I need more for these standing stones and their rules. I'm now just freaking frustrated at this point. I need answers. Outlander, period. But I enjoy the younger characters quite a bit as well, but I also still enjoy Jamie and Claire, and I didn't care for the Regulator storyline throughout the 2 seasons. However, the fact that they did at least show the Battle of Alamance, or whatever that's called, and they found some resolution for it, made it feel worthwhile. So there are things that maybe I'm not as bought into as I was in the first 2 seasons, but I'm still along for the ride because I care about the characters so much. In fact, I was thinking about that as I was thinking through this season of the show, which, by the way, I binged again, so it's very fresh. Is this a show that I would ever jump the shark on? I don't think so. I think I'm in it to the end because I care about the characters. Not that I think that it's anywhere near jump the shark territory, but they'd have to do something pretty shocking for me to want to stop watching. So there might be quibbles, there might be, foibles, but other than that, I'm still in it, and that's where I sit. So let's talk about season 5 of Outlander. This is the actual season that aired in the year 2020. We are recording this in December of 2020. It probably will not publish until early spring, because I'm telling you that's more likely the case. But we're almost caught up, and we don't know when season 6 will premiere because of this whole pandemic thing that's been going on. So we're now along with the rest of the world, and if you've listened to our whole series, thanks for coming along with us. So talk about season 5. What did you like? What didn't you like? There's a huge mixed variety of opinions, so I'm looking forward to hearing them. Go. Oh, good. I stumped the room again.
I just don't know where to begin. All the things I want to talk about are not at the beginning of the season, and I know you frown upon such things.
Well, we don't want to go straight to the end. But Karen wants to talk. Let Karen talk.
I will start with the first episode, the wedding. It's visually beautiful, and it feels so good, and there are so many things wrong. Spanish moss, which has been artfully draped in the trees, doesn't grow in the mountains. Not in North Carolina. Absolutely not. It grows in the lowlands, and really not much in North Carolina at all. But yeah, so Spanish moss was a big no-no. White dresses were not particularly in vogue until Queen Victoria. Mm-hmm. So the fact that she's in a white dress, white was very difficult to obtain. It took a lot of ash and bleaching. I believe in the book her dress is blue, but somebody thought she should have a white dress. It's very pretty. All the lovely needlework on it is lovely. But other than that, and they kind of took it out of context in the book, there's a giant clan gathering at Grandfather Mountain in North Carolina where all the Scottish immigrants have come to trade goods and trade stories, and that's where the wedding actually takes place. And Jocasta was supposed to get married at the same time, but there's a whole side story where she gets prevented from getting married because they arrest the priest. So, but other than that, I mean, they you're right, they did. They distilled it down to the basics of the story, and it was lovely. It was very pretty and very nicely done on that first episode, and kind of gave you the sense that everybody was there.
I forgot that you are the panelist's resident botanist accuracy finder, so that's funny. I do remember thinking quite a lot during this season, though, you know, for filming this in Scotland, I think they do a pretty good job of at least evoking the Carolinas pre-too much development. I suspend disbelief, but I didn't even think about the Spanish moss.
Yeah, I follow the production designer on Instagram, and he actually did a scouting trip to North Carolina before they were going to start filming these, and he took some very beautiful pictures, went back home to Scotland, took very similar beautiful pictures, and posted them to his account. And so his followers and like fans of the show, he's like, where am I, North Carolina or Scotland? And hardly anybody actually figured out which pictures were from which location. Even the North Carolina fans, he said, I read an interview too, so he was like, even our North Carolina fans thought that we were in North Carolina when it was a picture from the Scotland countryside.
Did anybody talk about the moss?
Yeah, and he's like, you know, a little bit of Spanish moss in the trees, and no one can tell. But like Karen said, yeah, Spanish moss was a little too prevalent. That's probably the one bone I have to pick. But I'm not.
Also, the macrame background. They're like the thing that got me was like the macrame like background thing. Like I was like, I have seen this wedding background on Instagram in the year of our Lord 2020. That's what did it for me. Was the macrame hangy thing.
But isn't it about the storyline?
I mean, I didn't even pause. I didn't think anything. If I thought about the white dress on Brianna, I would have said, she's not supposed to wear her white.
It was too shocking. It was too shocking for the background. And come on, could she get to the house out there and still stay white in the mud?
No.
I doubt it.
But it was a pretty dress. Good stitching.
Now I feel weird for not getting hung up on any of those particular things about the wedding. I was just like, oh, this is nice.
I didn't catch the moss. I'll admit that. Because I was more drawn to the dress.
We're here for it. We're here for the aesthetic. It's a good time.
But you called out the macrame.
Yeah, I'm not saying it ruined it for me. I was just saying it was more of a, okay. And I was like, well, Brianna is from the 70s, so maybe she really wanted macrame in her.
Yeah, because if it became
she really wanted macrame in her wedding.
Brianna's time, then it would make sense that she incorporated a little bit of it in the decor, because that's part of who she is. But
Roger would be more of the macrame than her. She was an engineer.
Maybe that was his input into the wedding.
Yeah. She gave him one thing. She was like, Roger, honey, you get to do one thing for the wedding. And he was like, macrame.
I believe it.
I do like the times where they flash forward to them courting and those moments between the two of them in the future. Like, I get more up until the point where they're reunited later in the season. Like, I really enjoyed those moments between the two of them. They're just such charming actors. And I really hope they get along together in real life, because they seem like they're good friends.
This is the first season I actually like Brianna.
Whoa.
I know, right?
Groundbreaking.
Maybe because she does something
Aww.
later this season.
I've always, I mean, I didn't love her at first, but I've liked her at least the past couple of seasons, and I very much enjoy Brianna and Roger's storyline. I love how they develop and evolve, and we've already, alluded to Roger's unfortunate hanging incident because the British are dumb. I mean, so no offense to our British listeners, but back in the Americas, we weren't fans of you, okay? And so then what happened was they mistook him and they hung him, and he was traumatized because his voice is so much a part of him, and I love that they carried, I mean, I don't love that it happened to him, and I actually yelled at my TV screen like, "You're killing Roger!" That was my reaction. But then the next episode, I was like, okay, although the silent movie thing was weird.
Imagine having to wait for that episode.
No.
Imagine if you were in our shoes and you're watching it as it aired. That was not fun.
I Googled it to make sure that he didn't die.
Yeah, I did too.
You don't know what they're going to change in the show compared to the books.
Yeah,
I've just been like, making a change, peeps.
Yeah. Lori and I both knew that one was going to happen, that he would survive. It's not easy, but...
And in the books, it's even more traumatizing because he basically loses his singing voice permanently.
Oh.
And that becomes a very hard point for Roger to get over, that he can't sing anymore. And they've dropped a little bit of his story by how does he fit in? And they don't pick up what he becomes in the New World or in pre-revolutionary America. And maybe they will next season, I don't know. But he has that journey of faith, and it really becomes very much integral of his story when something happens with Jamie and they actually solidify that father-son married relationship, and they've kind of dropped that, and I'm hoping they'll pick it up in the next season. I don't know, that's why I'm not going to spoil it. If the next season comes out and they don't come across the storyline, then I'll spoil it for everybody. But there is a profound thing that happens between him and Jamie, and
some nuggets of that alluded to anyway.
The snake bite episode
to the British. That, oh my gosh, I cannot.
That's not the storyline though.
Mackenzie, who swapped him, and like he sort of conned the British into.
Did anybody catch it?
Yes.
Did anybody catch Buckley?
Graham McTavish.
I did. I was like, who is he? And then I was like, oh my gosh, it's Dougal.
It's Dougal.
I didn't catch it. Oh, I'll have to go back and...
Yeah.
I missed it the first time. I caught it on the rewatch.
Oh, I caught it the first time. They did a little Benjamin Buttoning CGI with the actor who plays Dougal. But, I mean, as soon as he came on screen, he had a huge gasp, and I threw my hands up, like, so excited. And Zach, my husband, who watches it with me, he looked at me and he's like, what? And I'm like, it's Dougal! He's playing his son with Galus!
His voice is so distinctive. It's almost like before I even saw him, it was like, why does that guy sound familiar? And I couldn't place it until I saw him.
When you heard his voice before you saw the face on screen, that was like, like, wait a second, what did I just hear? I'm really excited. Yeah. Payoff. Huge. Loved it. Please bring him back for more. But I'm sure the character comes back.
No. It's too bad. I don't think we'll see Buckley anymore. That's about his crowning achievement in the books. But I do have to say, I know Kylie did not like the whole regulators and the Battle of the Alamance. Well, you did say the Battle of the Alamance sort of brings it full circle, and it does. But that whole process of the War of the Regulation was the precursor to one of the first skirmishes of the Revolutionary War. And that whole regulator issue around Hillsborough started in 1768. They sort of compressed time into a several week period instead of it being several years brewing. But it started in 1768 and culminated on May 16th of 1771 in the Battle of Alamance. And the fact that they still kept that, because it is historically, we don't learn about it in history books, but historically it was a pivot point for the Revolutionary War, for what was coming down the road. And the fact that she's done such a beautiful job of pulling this minor thing in history and giving it such life, because it's kind of a 2-line thing in most history books if it shows up at all.
Sure.
And they were very good about portraying it with the British all lining up in their line, and the sniping, the guerrilla warfare that was America at the time of how they attacked, and how the Scottish really did play a forefront, because they're still pissed off about Culloden. And they want the revenge on the British. Why not? Because you booted us out of our country and destroyed our heritage for a time.
And that's the part that I like, the parallel that's drawn and the connection to history. I mean, when I say I don't like it, it's not that I don't think it's an important story to tell. I just felt it got a little bit tedious after a bit. It
did. They did stretch it out quite a bit.
Yeah. And I feel like it could have... I know why they did. They were maximizing the impact of that battle and what would ultimately become, spoiler, Murtaugh's death. But at the same time, as somebody noted, I think it was Lori, American history is not my favorite either. I'd rather be back across the ocean in England, Scotland, and Ireland. And so when we're in these pre-Revolutionary War skirmishes, even though I should maybe connect to it more, I don't. So, which isn't to say that I didn't enjoy it at all. I liked other parts of the season better. I wanted to go back a little bit, though, to Roger and Jamie. I do think that they have, in this season, started to pepper a development of an evolution of their relationship, because Roger repeatedly says he doesn't respect me, he doesn't have faith in me, he doesn't think I can do anything, he's made me captain, I don't even know what that means. I mean, there's all that. And then they have the episode where Jamie gets bit by the snake when they're hunting the buffalo. And at that point, there's a little bit, I don't think it's quite the turning point you're alluding to, but I have faith that whatever you're thinking of is probably going to make it into season 6. I have read a little bit ahead on how they're developing the stories for season 6. They did say they pulled from books 5 and 6, I believe, to make season 5. They want to pull from 6 and 7 for season 6. So they're kind of doing what Game of Thrones did, where they're starting now to go halves and halves a little bit.
So the biggest contention between Jamie and Roger, is the fact that it's religious based, Catholic versus Protestant. And they do a snake scene in the book that probably won't happen, but
it's in there. It was all about episode 9.
Yeah, episode 9, and there is a whole exchange about, it's the prayer that, he says something to the effect of, I could say a prayer for the sick, but you'd probably get mad at me, it's not in Latin.
Well, and I guess this is, and I'm going to go ahead and spoil it, Mac wants to become a preacher, and Jamie has serious ass issues with that. He does not want that to happen, and so the whole acceptance of him becoming a preacher becomes a pivot point in the book between him and Mac Roger, but I think they're dropping that storyline. I don't think they're putting it in.
Oh, that could be, because what there ended up being near the end of the season was more about Brianna thinking about where does she fit in this society, and there was a whole conversation between her and Claire. I wanted to be an engineer. I don't know what I can do in this time. And they discuss Roger maybe becoming a university teacher, or now maybe a schoolhouse teacher, and then Bree can be a math teacher in the schoolhouse. So I think maybe they've subverted their play storylines between the two of them.
And the pivotal point does deal with the snake. Roger's giving his first sermon, and this is in the books, giving his first sermon, and a snake comes in and is going down the aisle, and Jamie picks it up and puts it in his kilt. And that's, and Roger could see all this going down. And he sits there with a snake in his kilt listening to Roger's sermon to give him that support. And that's where their relationship changes. And there was humor involved, but there was also, I'm sitting here in a Protestant church, but I don't want to, but I'm here because of you.
Well, we'll
I'm
see.
sorry, what?
We don't know. It might happen.
Especially since, anybody want to talk about episode 11 and 12? And
Look at y'all.
that whole episode.
I'm being so good over here.
We're already getting Luann and Laura's mind about their relationship.
We talked about the wedding. We talked about the wedding. We got
it all gets weeded out.
We talked about the first part of the season. Let's just get straight to the end.
Maybe we should cover.
We did the wedding. We did the war.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we should cover just a little bit more of the middle of the sandwich before we get to the other piece of bread. Is all I'm saying.
Well, how about this? Was anyone else surprised by Murtaugh's death? Either the fact that he was killed off this season after they brought him back, and the way that it happened.
I had no idea what they were going to do with Murtaugh because,
it
was a storyline made up. So I was like, oh, is he going to survive and end up with just Costa? But she secretly yearns for somebody that they're not doing, so.
When she pivoted away and was going to marry, I forget what his name is, for husband number 4. Duncan. Yeah. I knew that Murtaugh was not long for the world. It seems to me that because of Jamie and Murtaugh's bond and the fact that Jamie was trying to protect Murtaugh for so long, and Murtaugh was like, you got to do what you got to do, I got to do what I'm got to do, but I'm still going to uphold the oath I made to your mother. I just knew that he was not going to survive the season.
I was just surprised I agree with that, but in the moment that they did it,
it
just surprised me in the moment.
Friendly. I was surprised that it was Jamie's rookie guy, one of those teenagers that he recruited.
It's like, oh, that's irony.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. But I was very sad, but then right after that was the faux hanging of Roger. That's literally was my shout at the TV screen. You're gonna kill Roger too? Just like that? You're gonna be like that, Outlander? What do you think you are, Game of Thrones?
Roger just has the crummiest luck.
He sure does.
If he can foil it up, boy, or if he could be at the wrong place.
Yeah.
But he does have a lovely singing voice.
Well, he did. I don't know
It's
if we'll ever
getting
hear that.
better. He sang a little to young Jemmy.
Let's see.
We just want to find out about Roger's music career.
He could be
With
a
old
minstrel.
Susanna.
It's all my darling.
Research what that song really means.
Oh, Susanna or Oh, My Darling Clementine? Because that's the one they sang.
It was Clementine, wasn't it? But still, research the lyrics and what those are. It's not an innocent song.
I imagine not. So are you really just... I feel like we should at least set up the end before we jump right to that other piece of bread.
There's just such a...
in Brownsville.
Right. That's what I mean. So talk about Browns and the Brownsville.
That's actually all very much from the books. That piece, they pretty much kept very true to the books. The baby, the goats, the Beardsley twins, all of that is all pretty much right out of the book. And poor Isaiah Morton.
Poor? Is he
or
poor?
maybe not so poor.
My question about
he's
poor...
not
Yeah, my question about poor Isaiah Morton is what's going on with the wife he's cuckolding?
Not much, apparently.
I guess not. And then why is he into the 14-year-old? I'm just having some questions.
Yeah. But, yeah.
Unfortunately, they married him really young back then.
Oh, I know. But he was already married. So let's presume that he has a 16-year-old wife. Why is he on to the 14-year-old?
It's a whole bunch of ickiness.
Yeah.
That entire set of characters, and I know they're such a driving force behind a lot of things that happen this season, but I just...
Kind of like a sailor having a wife at every port, because chances of the wives meeting cross towns are not likely. So, there you go.
It wasn't unusual.
No, not at all.
Did you have any sympathy for or any affinity at all for Lionel and Richard Brown, even before the finale?
Absolutely not.
It always seems so just nasty and curmudgeon-y and just...
Skeevy.
Nasty, old, misogynistic white men.
Yes, and I think that's why I
No
found
sympathy.
the first portion of the season so tedious. It's like, I get that from a historical period standpoint, that's what it's like. But it's...
I thought it was a good contrast for Roger and Jamie being that bridge that, wait, they're not actually that misogynist compared to those evil people.
Well, yeah.
I mean, yes, but also Jamie and Roger still definitely have their moments.
Oh, yeah.
And that's one of the things that kind of skeeved me out the first time that I watched. Again, when I rewatched this time, I skipped through a lot. But when I originally watched this season earlier this spring, that was one of the things that kind of skeeved me out about Jamie and Roger and their whole, like, oh, I have to avenge my daughter/wife's honor. Because that's just so patriarchal and misogynistic, and they just kind of jump headlong into these, like, crazy plans. They don't really consult Brianna on it. Like, you know, even, like, at the beginning of the season, she has to find out that her rapist is still alive by eavesdropping. And it's a mess. I don't like that.
Okay, I'm going to push back, and I'm not going to be the likely one to push back on this subject, but I think they would have told her eventually. I do think that was definitely Roger's intent, but Claire didn't even want to tell Brianna at first because of how traumatized she still was. I mean, she's clearly suffering from PTSD throughout most of the season.
Oh, yeah.
And the only reason she confronts Stephen Bonnet in the end is because she's forced to, because he chases her down because he believes that Jemmy is his, because that's what she told him in the prison when she was trying to confront him the first time before he was supposed to be hanged, and then he wasn't hung. And so, you know, one of the fascinating things I think about Outlander is that even though the characters, the female characters particularly, are very progressive and feminist, and it's told through that lens, you're still back in a time when that kind of stuff just didn't happen. Or they would have been like a Gillis and burned at the stake, although she really wasn't burned at the stake, and that's a whole thing. But so I don't get mad at either Jamie or Roger. Roger is coming out of the 60s, and Jamie is coming out of the 1760s and earlier and later. And so the fact that they are willing to come along for time travel, that Jamie supports Claire's healer pathway, the fact that, I mean, she's talking about growing mold to find penicillin. He's like, okay, whatever, get the germs. You know, there's a lot of things. I don't think it's misogyny with Jamie as much as it is just old-fashioned ideals and his very hyper temper. In our previous episode, Lori talked about the fact she was very upset that his hair color wasn't the right shade of red because the theme of the Jamie character is his temper. It's his righteous indignation. It's his set of principles, which may or may not be correct, but they certainly are socially placed in the time period in which they find themselves. And so there's that constant struggle, but that's what makes the Jamie and Claire relationship so interesting, because she's got to kind of meet him in the middle, and he's got to kind of meet her in the middle, and the middle is 200 years apart.
Well, and for the most part, he's a pretty chill dude, Jamie is, by season 5 in comparison.
And he's turned 50.
And he's turned 50 and still is gorgeous.
Well,
and
he's
a
not really
sharpshooter.
50.
He's still a sharpshooter.
You know, that an aside, the one thing I will say about Stephen Bonnet was how satisfying was it to watch him tied to a stake while the tide came in.
And how slow that death would be.
Oh, yeah. I feel so mean to a degree, but I was just like, yeah.
So how did you feel about Bree planting a musket shot in his head?
That was a mercy death.
Yep.
I know, that's what I'm saying. You wanted to be the satisfying drowning. She gave him the mercy death.
No, well, I think he experienced the panic of it enough, and he's a heck of an actor that you can see it in his face that it's like, this is the nightmare coming true, and I think she waited long enough that he fully felt that.
How satisfying for her to plant that ball between his eyes.
Exactly, that's where I
Who
was
am I
going
to say?
She kind of got the best of both with that one. It's like, okay, you're definitely dead now.
Yep.
And I think...
And Roger couldn't have made that shot.
Yeah, was right. Well, that too, but I think Roger was right on when he asked her, was it mercy or did you want to make sure he was dead? And I love that she just answer. And she just walked away.
The answer was both.
I was all about it.
Yep.
Well, it's funny because while I was watching the season, I was like, okay, Roger's redemption in everybody's eyes is he's finally going to learn how to shoot, and he's going to take out Stephen Bonnet. And then when they panned away from the drowning post, it was Brianna, and I was like, okay.
I'm glad that they did it that way, though.
Yeah.
I'm glad that it was Brianna.
Yeah.
Me too. Like, for story-wise, it needed to be her. She needed to literally kill him.
Absolutely.
It was her in the book, too.
Good.
Oh, yeah, the consistency of the series is that feminist edge. So they do stay true to that throughout.
I also do have to, Edward Spaliers, if you're listening to our podcast, tweet at us at CPU Podcast. But also, he was a phenomenal actor in this role because that character could have been entirely a clown or entirely tedious, and he never was. There was always that slightly unhinged quality, but a sense of humor, a sense of dark humor about him that was very unsettling but drew you in all the same. So that was really well done.
Oh, yeah.
And how he flipped from a psychopath to the charming.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, ooh.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the way the character was written, and he really did a beautiful job of bringing that character to life.
Oh, yeah.
Even though it's a very despicable character. But
Hate the character, love the performance.
It's fun to play the villain, right?
Particularly, like, for me, all of that, like, skin crawliness about him came to a head when he had her held captive, and just how he can switch on half a dime from, oh yeah, I seem like I am actually sane, and okay, we're making progress here too. Whoa, man, you're a wackadoo.
I love...
And Brianna's manipulation of him.
Yeah, I was just
that comes through about how she manipulates him to get out of some icky situations by and reading the situation. And I think that's where I admire her work in this season, is it showed her acting chops of being conniving but also being brave and trying to get out of the situation.
And a survivor.
Yeah, she was much more layered this season. She seemed like more of a three-dimensional character, but man, yeah, really impressed with her, especially during that particular episode where she was held captive.
I love the fact that she tells the story of Moby Dick abridged because she's trying to get him to see the parallel, and it completely goes over his head. He just wants to know the end. Mm-hmm. But then it produces that revelation about his nightmare, and I just think that that's really well written, but it was very well performed because her barely contained fear, also her, because she mentions earlier to Claire how much she loves Moby Dick, and so she's also got this weird passion coming through, talking through the Moby Dick storyline, and it's a very interesting combination of emotions that are playing between those two actors. It's a very complex scene.
And I think a shout-out needs to go to the young woman who was the handmaiden at that house. She's trying to survive, too, and she has choices to make. And her path is typical of that time period where he's given me money. I have a place to sleep. This is all good with me. No, I'm not going to help you because my life is infinitely better here. And I think that parallel shows a nice class distinction as well as women.
So now,
I think it does say something about, female solidarity, or sometimes, especially in a situation like this, the lack thereof, like whether as women in a situation where we're being exploited, we choose to have our own self-interest at heart or to support our fellow women. I think that was interesting to think about watching that episode.
Agreed. But now we're on. That was episode 10, right? So we're just practically to the bread.
Now we're to chapter 11, episode 11.
Yeah. So who would like to kick it off, and what do you want to say?
Well, that's the whole episode where Roger and Brianna suddenly learn that Jimmy can hear the stones. He can hear the gemstones. So they start making all the preparations to go back through the standing stones, and they do all these beautiful goodbyes and heartfelt long looks and last looks, and then we get to the last episode, and it was all for naught. It was such a beautifully written episode, but it ends up being for no reason. And I really wonder why they pulled that in there. Because it just seems like it was...
Too.
Well, there were 3 episodes.
There
were 3 episodes that I reacted to like that this season. The first episode was the one where they encounter the man who married a bunch of his wives and murdered them, and the goats were living in the house, and she was pregnant, and she had a baby of mixed race. While I, in some ways, get what they were trying to say with the episode, it didn't fit into the overall story structure in any kind of meaningful way, except for where did the child go, how's wee Bonnie. That's all we got out of that episode, number 1. Number 2 was the post-hanging Roger Mack episode. I get that they were trying to allude to the fact that Bree and Roger, some of their happiest times were watching silent movie marathons with Buster Keaton back in the 60s. But the fact that they spent so much time kind of going into the silent movie motif for him, it was something they repeated later on in the season finale, not as a silent movie, but as a vision of the future where everybody from the past was for Claire. I just thought, well, okay, this is interesting, I guess, but it's starting to get distracting with how many times they're doing it. So that one. And then the third one was this episode. Now, what I will say in defense of this episode is that they say in the finale that we were trying to get home, we thought of home, and this is where it brought us. So I accepted that in the end. What I'm not accepting is the explanation around the stones. I need more information.
When we last recorded, and you were like, I really hope in season 5 that we get more explanation, that we get more information. I was just like, ooh, she's not gonna be happy.
No, I'm not, because why Claire, Bree, Roger, well, I don't know why. I have no theories. Why them? Why Ottertooth, whose name is Bob? Why this other guy that's part of Brown's gang? Why, why Gellis? Why these people? Why these particular people? Like, I'm getting that you have to be able to hear the stones. They have a vibration. They have a temperature. It's not unlike the stories around Stonehenge. So all of this kind of makes me like, okay, I get it. It's magical. But why these people? This is going to be the question that if Diana / the writers on this TV show don't answer, I'll be like, bah!
You're going to start flipping tables.
I will.
Most of the answers are in the books. Galet's, I can't remember if it's the 3rd book. I think it's the 3rd book. Galis actually has done all this research. And so while, Roger and Brianna are dating going around Scotland and dating, and they meet Galis, and then Galis crosses over, and they go back and they find her book. And in the book, she's written all of this research that she's done about the stones and all the dates where people disappeared and what did they have in common and what did they need. And so they just sort of dangle bits and pieces of it at you, but they don't give you the full explanation that you get by reading through that book and all of her psychobabble about, needing 5 perfectly cut colored stones and a blood sacrifice.
Well, we do see a glimpse of her book, and we do get the explanation around the gemstones, and she does say stuff about the blood sacrifice, because Claire and Bree always wonder, well, we didn't have to sacrifice anybody, we just walked through. So, yeah, all those hints are there, but at some point, I mean, I think they try to red herring it a little bit. Like, part of Claire's narration this season was that whole piece in the episode where she flashes back to the patient who was allergic to penicillin. It opens with her at his Remembrance Day in church, and she's talking about, when I meet God, one of the questions I won't have is how time works, because I will have experienced it. Okay, great. So I guess we're just supposed to accept that. But my mind is an inquiring one. And if you're going to talk about this kid can randomly now hold this stone at age 2 and can go through the stones, I need information. So if you're going to make it a plot point, you got to do the thing. You got to do the work. And so if it's in the books, put it in the show. If it's not in the books, Diana, help.
Well, we're on the subject of time travel. And to get you into maybe a less crazy headspace, I love how relaxed young Ian was about the whole time travel thing.
Yes, me too.
And their interplay, I think that was probably my best moment of the season, when he's like, you know, I've known for a long time something's up. And I know I'm not supposed to know, but I know, so you might as well tell me. And how it was just like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. And all of the little interplays of him, you know, digesting that after that initial interplay. I just loved it.
I loved when he came
of what Murtaugh was like, well, you know, why didn't you just say so? You know, that kind of like just family moment of like, yeah, of course, I believe you. Just wonderful.
I think part of that acceptance comes from his time in a totally different culture and opening to new ideas. I think if he had been told when he hadn't gone into the indigenous population, he might have struggled more with it, because that would have been a conflict of religion and everything else. And that's one thing they kind of glaze over is Ian's story and his journey of losing a beloved wife, and where is he going? How does he fit in between two cultures now?
I was just going to say that was probably, to me, the biggest flaw of this season, although I'm hoping they develop it in season 6, is that young Ian comes back and we don't learn much of where he was, other than I did love how Roger Mack and young Ian kind of healed each other, and I love their bond and friendship that they have when they went out surveying the governor's bequeathment of land to Roger and Bree. I thought that was a very moving episode, from the paper airplane to the scene by the river, and it just made me want to learn young Ian's backstory and his journey even more.
And he's another one who just really acted his socks off. Like, they didn't give a ton of details into what happened to him, but he's matured so much from when we saw the older version of him last season.
I wanted to know why they let him go, since it was repayment of a debt that they kept him to begin with.
You might just have to read the damn books, Kylie.
Damn it.
We're going to have a really long Outlander. You might be able to get through them all.
Mm-hmm. Well, we do have some more quarantine left on this. I mean, vaccines are coming as we are told, but it's going to take a while, so why not?
That's true.
They're really good books.
I got through the bulk of them in about a month, so you can do it.
Okay, so what about that season? So Karen talked about episode 11. What about that episode 12?
I think what this show does well is show trauma and the aftermath of that without it being gratuitous. And they focus in on how people process trauma. That said, I've only watched the last episode once because it's too much, can't do it. But from what I recall, I really, and this is what's so frustrating about that scene, I love that house from the 60s and everything about all of the books. I wish it wasn't in that episode because it's too hard to watch. But yeah. I dig the setting.
If someone were to, like, put it up on YouTube and, like, edit just those bits together, I would watch that. But much like the season 1 finale with Jamie's assault, I cannot watch that again. I watched it once. I will never watch it again. And it's the same thing for this finale. I think that there were some very interesting storytelling devices that they used, like, the whole dissociation scene and the symbolism that they used through the costuming and the set design and the camera work. I think the filmmaking in those scenes is really good, but that whole thing just makes me really mad.
Yeah, I didn't obviously watch this season in real time. I caught up over the past couple of weeks. So I have this horrible habit of I will read articles about shows that I'm not currently watching, but I will watch in a couple of weeks. So like there was a big one about the wedding. So I, heard about the wedding before I watched it. And then same thing. I read an article about the season finale of the show well before I watched it. So I knew what was coming. And I put off watching the episode until earlier today, the day that we're recording. I watched it a couple hours ago. Yeah, even though you know what's happening, it's still very hard to prepare yourself mentally. So I can only imagine what it was like watching it in real time where you don't have that advanced knowledge that this is coming at you again. But it also makes me think, how many more times are we going to see members of this family being assaulted in this way? How many more times can they run that storyline through? It never gets easier. I love the parts from the 60s. That was a nice break from that, even though you know why she was doing it. Yeah, I'm very tired of watching these scenes.
I agree. I'm very sick of seeing literally every member of this family be horrifically and violently sexually assaulted. It's gotten to the point where I feel like sexual assault is being used as a plot device. Mm-hmm. Whenever something shocking or climactic needs to happen, or some character development needs to happen, it's extremely frustrating, and this is the thing that has caused me to question whether or not I'm going to keep watching. Because if they do this again, if something like this happens again, if they rely on sexual assault as a plot device again in future, and I mean, I know book readers, you'll know if this happens or not, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it, because it's exhausting.
Yeah, and it was hard listening to Claire after she's returned home, listing everything that her family's been through. I've lost my husbands, I've done this, and this has happened. It's like, okay, writers, do you realize this has all happened? We've all sat there and watched it, you've written it, But the fact that she said, I will not be broken by this, wonderful, great. I'm very happy that she won't be, but I don't want to see it again. I don't want to go through this. There's other plot devices out there that they can use. So I really, really hope this doesn't happen in the books again. I have a bad gut feeling that it probably will to other people because of the time period, and it's an easy plot device, but I really hope they don't use it again.
So my reaction, this was the second episode I talked to the TV on, and my reaction was, oh, so they're going to gang rape her now? This is where we are? Which happens. It happened in the time period. I keep going back to Game of Thrones because Game of Thrones was on a premium channel, and there was a lot they could show. And people were very up in arms about the assault of Sansa by Ramsay. And at the time, while I get it, it's triggering, you don't want to watch it, it's very bad, there was a payoff to her character, and that was my argument the whole time. There was something that clicked in her between Joffrey and Ramsay that then got her to the place where she could be Queen of the North. And I will hold to that to the end of this day. With Outlander, with Jaime's particularly, I thought was moving and telling because it was something that you don't normally see. And it was as much a reality of the time period as men and women. With Brianna, I was like, okay, I don't know why, but you know what, it produced some good storylines. We had father and daughter sort of relating on that. We have some post-traumatic stress from her aspect. It gave her some debate about whether or not she remains in the time period. But now we have Claire. And I understand why we get there. She's acting under the pseudonym. This is a very She's spreading around these crazy ideas about the rhythm method and other things. But is the device that we get to at the end of the season with this particular group of men and what happens to Claire, is it going to pay off? And that's going to be my question. I agree. I think it's overused. We know that it happened. There are other conflicts, other antagonistic forces they can throw into the mix. And by they, I mean both author and show, if it's the same. I will go along with this if it pays off, but I also, in the moment, could not suspend disbelief long enough to say, why is this happening?
Oh, that's easy. The motivation's very easy why they did it.
Not the, what do you mean, the motivation aside from her acting in the, as the doctor, or I'm talking about a global why. Why are we coming here again to this particular violent
like a writer,
act?
Producer, why?
Right, exactly. Not the character arc itself.
Again, I understand why they put that in because, well, maybe it's because I've read the books, but I guess I don't understand. Do you know why they did it? I guess that's where I'm confused. Why do you think they did it?
From the show's perspective, as I said earlier, I understand that they're basically accusing her of heresy. Lionel already doesn't like her because Lionel sees her as helping his daughter run off with Isaiah, the adulterous guy who also impregnated the young child. Plus, he says more than once, "No woman talks to me like that," to her face. Then on top of that, he discovers the Dr. Rawlings nameplate in her medical kit, which of course she's issued her through Fergus's accidental printing of her advice to settlers that are future advice, such as things like the rhythm method. Don't have sex at this time and you won't get pregnant, that kind of stuff. So it's a combination, it's a lot of power dynamic there, not to mention the fact that their entire family feels slighted by the Frasers because of the whole nonsense for them joining the militia and back. So it's all rolled up into one, and none of that is unclear to me. We're talking about the actual utilization of sexual assault again in the overall drama that is Outlander a third time with a third character. And not just
sexual assault, gang rape.
Yeah, it's extra. It's more. It's like, if these weren't, let's do it big now here.
And so here is my question, because the motivation was 100% revenge on to Claire. How can you write, what could you write differently that would totally break a woman in that time period, in that moment, that doesn't have to do with sexual abuse? Because that is the ultimate, and you're seeing one of the strongest characters hit her breaking point. She could handle the war, the thing, and now it's put in there in this context that these men, the only way they can get revenge on her is gang rape. That's the only thing other than killing her. Other than killing her, this is the worst thing that she can experience. I guess I come from a different viewpoint in terms of historical versus a plot line in a story.
And so that goes to the second half of my comment. I can't speak on behalf of others who are reacting this way. That if they make it pay off in the end, knowing that I have read 0 books, I just watched the show for the first time, all 5 seasons. I don't know what comes next for Claire. But in as a fresh viewer, fresh to the story, I had a very similar reaction to Anna and to Kristen and to Samantha. Because at this point, I've watched this show over the course of several months now, and there's a lot that's happened that's along that same line. And I get what you're saying intellectually and rationally. Of course I know that. I just got done comparing it to Game of Thrones, loosely based on the Wars of the Roses. We don't need to go through that whole thing again. But if it pays off, if it gets to a place that feels satisfactory in the story, I may be able to go along for the ride. But it did throw me out from a suspension of disbelief perspective. Like, oh, we're here again? We're here again? That's where I was. I don't think any one of us could be blamed for that, even knowing the rationale that you're talking about, because it literally is the third time that we've seen it on screen, not to mention all of the references. So, Karen, you haven't said anything about this topic. Pivot.
I think there is a different, having read all the books, I was expecting it. I knew it was coming. So it wasn't a surprise to me. Not that I enjoyed it or thought it was great fun to watch. And I've been thinking about your question about does it resolve in a payoff? And I don't know. I mean, Claire's fine. Claire gets back to the business of being Claire, and the war breaks out. So things happen in the next book that allows her to go back to her basic modus operandi. She's a doctor, and that's where she finds her comfort. And so with a war on, she's back in her element. Does it actually result in a payoff, as you say? I don't know. I don't know how they're going to treat what's coming up next. But the good news is nobody else in the books that I've read so far, I haven't read the newest one, which isn't out yet, but nobody else gets gang raped. So, good news. Hey, spoiler alert.
So far, but okay.
I guess for me...
No, we don't have to watch that again.
Yes. Well, I'm also a book reader and had read this book before seeing it on screen, and of all of those particular scenes, this one I thought was easier to read than it was to watch.
Really? I felt
and
it was
I'm not sure why. Because, like, the way they played Brianna's rape last season, by not showing it and just having, it play off the faces, that was an easier watch than to read, like, what she was experiencing in her mind as it happened. Maybe it's just because of the way they portrayed it and showing her sort of going to that safe place in her mind that it was more indicative of a real experience, maybe. Mm-hmm. But I get where you're coming from, Kylie, of like, I'm over this. Like, enough.
I mean, yeah. I always look at, because people talk about this stuff, and it doesn't bother me showing the darkest sides of human nature in TV and film, if appropriately placed, if there is a development that goes with it. I'm thinking again of Game of Thrones and, the Red Wedding. The people that read the books knew that was coming and were laughing at the rest of us who were shocked out of our freaking minds when we watched the Red Wedding the first time.
Yep.
And then there was the Purple Wedding, but that was like an opposite thing. Instead of everybody gets sword death, you get to watch the slow and egregious poisoning that you cheered on. Yeah, Joffrey, you're dying. That kind of thing. I didn't have either of those reactions up on this. What I had was, it's this again, is what I had.
Well,
you know what I mean?
But how they showed the reactions to the three different characters, each one's different on how they dealt with it. So I think they're maybe going more into the different PSTD fallouts from rape and how each one deals with them differently. And that might be your payout, is how do they move on? And they each move on three different separate ways.
And it also seemed like a way to move it forward because, as I mentioned before, Jamie goes so chill. He's running the farm, doing his thing, and he gets back in this really, I don't know what the right word is.
Element?
This very, like, warlike,
oh.
Lights the cross, all of the, banding together the militias and doing all of the, like, okay, we're just going through the motions of doing this, and you can see the emotion in it for him of, okay, now it's hit home. Like, this is real now.
And in the books, there is a long scene with Jamie and Claire discussing what happens and how they heal both from it.
Well, maybe that'll be in the next season, since we literally end the season on she just gets home and they're very naked in the very last scene. He's just kind of holding her close.
Yeah. And I feel like that was maybe an allusion to that conversation. Roger and Brianna had a very similar one, too, where he had her blow out the candle and he told her, I killed the man. So I think, as far as those scenes from the book go, I think that's how they represented it. I don't know if we're going to get it fully in season 6. It'd be nice if we did, to get some sort of closure, maybe, on this horrific start to this episode. But if we don't, then I'm going to take that final scene as them discussing it and her starting to move forward from it.
Anna's shell-shocked into Silence.
I just, and like you say, Kylie, I think I will definitely be revisiting my feelings and opinions on this and some other things from season 5 once we get another season. Like I said before, when I initially watched this past spring, I was like, I honestly don't know if I can keep watching this show if this is what they're going to continue to do. I will probably watch season 6, but I don't think I'm going to pay money to watch it. I'll probably wait until it comes out on DVD and get it from the library or something like that. And part of that will be to find out what happens to the characters, out of curiosity, just generally, and to see where the story goes, but also in hanging on to that shred of hope that they won't have, from a storytelling perspective, they won't have put her through that for nothing. Because to me, at the end of the episode where she has her, I realize I'm stronger than this speech, and they have sex, it seems like they kind of rush her, like the aftermath of that, in order to have some sort of kind of like resolution at the end of the season. I think if they were going to do this, I wish it would have come a little, like maybe an episode or two earlier in the season. So if we're going to kind of wrap things up by the end of the season, we would have time for that resolution to actually play out. I felt like where we got to, like, very, very end of the episode was kind of rushed. Because if you're going to put your main character through something this horrific, you're going to have to deal with the fallout of that. You can't do that to your character and then just be like, oh, but she's fine, and then continue on.
And that's one of my complaints about this episode, is they reached into season 6 to pull that information from the 6th book and bring it forward into the 5th season for a cliffhanger, but it's not really a cliffhanger. You're right. It leaves things feeling rushed and unfulfilled. They should have kept it in season 6 where they could have built to it and then showed the resolution, and it would have had a more organic feel.
Out of curiosity for the book readers, where does this event fall within the context of the 6th book? Is it in the beginning, middle, end?
In the first third of the book, probably.
Okay, so it probably would have been within the first, 3, maybe 4 episodes if they would have kept book 6 as season 6 on its own.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's also important to note that prior seasons have been 13 or more episodes. This is the first season that's 12, and next season will be 12. Stars did a
and
double
lots of
renewal.
exciting storylines happen in the next season. In the next book 6, with a lot of humor. Of course, there is a little bit of drama, but I find the resolution very hilarious. We'll see if they play that out.
This is a nice segue to this question. So now we're in water cooler mode, and typically on our water cooler episodes, I have to ask a question like this. But I must say, book readers, try to resist your spoilerificness, okay? How do you believe, so we've talked about how we believe the story is progressing and how it's in keeping with source material or not. What do you think can or should happen in season 6? What hopes and wishes do you have going forward, or what predictions do you have as far as what we'll see? Again, book readers, tread lightly.
Anna Laura should go first because she hasn't read the books.
I haven't either.
I haven't. I've only read the first book. I would like to see in a season 6, again, holding on to that shred of hope, I would like to see actual fallout and consequences of the events of the finale, but I have a sinking feeling that they might talk about it, but that it might get swept under the rug for something else happening, because it is a very fast-paced show, and that's something that I normally like about it, but I don't like something like that I don't like it when you don't have the time to process an event before moving on to the next one in a series. So I really hope they don't do that. I hope that if they're going to do this to their main character, that they give it the time to fully develop as the plot point. I would like to actually get to the American Revolution, because I think it is important to understand, the lead up to the American Revolution. It didn't just happen. It was a lot of different events piling on, and I'm really interested to see how they're going to depict it, especially since I feel like in American movies and TV, there's a kind of particular way the American Revolution is portrayed, and I'm wondering if this primarily non-American production is going to go the same route, or if they're going to kind of forge their own perspective on that. Yeah, for the characters, I'm hoping that, Claire gets some development, that her and Jamie are able to come together and heal, that Brianna and Roger get some more character development. I'm still kind of fed up with Roger and his fragile masculinity. It's getting really annoying at this point. And that was another thing that I didn't like about this season, was that we spend so much time with Roger and his fragile masculinity. And I'm like, Marcelly and Fergus are right there, and they're so cute, and they have such a good relationship. I want to see more of them. Yeah, that's what I want. And more Adzo the cat.
I can piggyback on Adzo. That's cool. That was a darling cat.
Cute frickin' cat.
As the other non-book reader, again, only having read book one, I kind of want to answer, but I kind of don't, because I do a lot of Googling. I know a lot of things that I shouldn't know as a regular viewer and non-book reader at this point.
She likes to spoil herself.
You probably know more than I do, and I've read all the books, but I don't remember much.
But I also, I searched for certain things. When we found out that, Brianna was pregnant, I Googled who is the father of her child and, things like that. So I hope that I hope that gets addressed. If they come to a conclusive response, I'd like to see the conclusiveness of it. I don't know. I want to see some positive character development. I want to see more of Fergus and Marcelly and all the hundreds of children that they will probably end up having, because it's just funny how she literally had a baby and she's pregnant again, within a month for the next one. I love her journey, too, to become a doctor. That's really engaging for me. Yeah, I want to see more of the second generation of the family and their kids and their growing families. Yeah, I hope eventually at some point maybe they get back to Scotland. That'd be kind of cool. It'd be really neat to see Brianna and Roger get to our present or the future, back to the 60s, 70s at some point, because that whole thing with the Stones was cool, but kind of a letdown that they didn't actually make it back. They went home, which was where they left. So I would
no place like home.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see someone travel back and come back and forth, maybe. That's all I'm going to say, because I know too much.
So I'm also a non-book reader, so I'll go next. These are my hopes, wishes, and dreams. I agree that we're going to need some emotional processing, but I also forwarded you a link from it for an interview between Katrina and Sam, kind of an extra quarantine interview they did. I don't know if you watched it. I haven't watched all of it, but one of the things they talk about is how Claire is going to... They all have to go through a lot of healing, so I do think we're going to get some of that processing. I don't think they can just leave it there. The season ends with bruises all over her body. I don't think they would just forget about that. But I also agree that I need it. I don't care about the revolution, but I know it's coming, so I'm just going to put that aside. I mean, we're so close. We're so close. We're so close to the Boston Tea Party at this point. Someone just throw the tea in and let's be done with it. My biggest hope, wish, and dream is that they explain the magic, for crying out loud. And I think it would be, I actually think, I want to know why it is that, so the other thing I note is that people seem to come from the future into the past and back again. But have we seen anybody come from the past into the future and back again? And I need more answers along that question. My next hope, wish, and dream is that somehow Jamie gets to see the future. That may never happen, or that may be the end of the book. Or maybe it'll be in season 6. I don't know. But I keep having this wish. I feel like Claire's safe place was also a bit of a wish foreshadow. But that may just be me, because it was the first time we saw any of them in that context. And it was interesting that she feels safer in the 60s as long as Jamie is there. Although he was wearing his Scottish garb from season 1, but that's okay. And I also agree I'd like to go back to Scotland. I mean, That's what everybody sold for me on this show. I'd like to see the mother country, please. One more time. I hope they get back. I'm hoping it's stone travel, but maybe it's not.
I'm feeling a tad bamboozled at the moment.
I'm feeling a little bamboozled, but it's okay. I'm enjoying the ride. I'm enjoying the journey. There's lots of possibility. You know, we're coming close to the date that they saw that led to the obituary, you know. That's got to come back into play here at some point. There's allegedly a fire, which was the other thing. I loved that episode with the snake, because Roger said to Jamie more than once, you die in a fire, you're going to survive the snake bite. And lo and behold, he did.
Roger's like, spoiler alert.
No. So
this isn't how it ends.
So I don't want the show to end too quickly, because I feel like there's more story to tell. But these are the things that now my heart yearns for. Always the magic, but everything else just connected to it.
I agree. Definitely more of the magic. That's the sci-fi nerd in me likes that kind of stuff. And it's not totally fantastical. I don't know if it's the history connection or what, but it feels more science-y to me, so I want more of that. am actually a fan of the Revolution and all the romantic notions about that, so I kind of like where this is going, but in that realm, like, I'd like more dashing men, like more Lord John. Like, I know he, sailed off to London, but turn that boat around, man. Come on back.
No more boat time for you.
Let Bree meet her brother.
Yeah, I think that would be really cool, especially since they've zipped back into the past again. It's like, okay, let's live it up, meet all the people. So, yes, more magic, more answers, more men.
Trifecta. Sam wants the trifecta.
You're a simple woman.
Well, I think you're probably right, since they did bring up the fact to Brianna that she has a brother. She will probably have an opportunity to meet Willie, and she won't be able to tell him what she knows, but I think she'll have a chance to meet him. I think she's going to have a chance to use some of her engineering skills. I think we will see something happen about the date on the newspaper, the newsletter.
I love how you're trying to be cagey.
You've read the book, so you know what she's caging about.
Yeah.
I'm trying to say
the way she's inflecting her voice is hilarious to me.
We can't tell you when.
We don't know when, but gosh, what was the other one I lost it. I had a third one and I forgot what it was. If you think of anything, Lori, go ahead.
Well, I find it freaking ironic that I get dissed about the history angle, and yet Anna Laura's like, I can't wait for the American Revolution, and I'm like, wait a minute, I've been dissed about the historical accuracy, and now we're excited about history.
Samantha was excited, Anna was intrigued. Let's just put that into perspective.
Yeah, but she talked about it when she's been kind of grumping at me a lot about looking at the historical accuracy. But on another note, what I miss, and it's very hard to do, is if you read the book, some of these animals have such personalities that come out, and there's the pig. I love the pig.
Oh gosh, the pig.
The sow is frickin', and I have met sows like this.
Oh, yeah.
And then there is a mule that is just a wonderful character unto itself, because we talked about the cat, which really doesn't have a personality in the book, but
he does on the show.
I know it kind of, and I have hopes for the sow, because the sow is important.
She is actually important,
and that's foreshadowing. I don't know if they'll do it in the show. If we get to the next season and she's not in there, I'm going to tell you the story, because it's funny, because this pig has more tude, and if you've ever raised hogs, they have tude. But as for next season, I think we're going to get full smacked with the Revolution and bits of characters coming out, like Washington, where we see the political aspect from the other side but we're also going to have the British side to this too coming together. And who's going to be spies?
Yeah.
We're going to get a lot of spy intrigue in the next season, and I can't wait for that. And
Roger will find himself somewhat, I think, he'll find more comfort in what he needs to do.
Well, and I think that got dropped in this season because they're going off book with Roger, that we don't know where he's going, because it was all about becoming a preacher, and in this wants to be a school professor. So maybe that will resolve itself. I'm excited to see how they treat the revolution, how they're going to mix it all up. So I'm intrigued to see how it all plays out.
Yeah.
So now we get to do the exercise of comparing and contrasting the seasons. So a couple of you mentioned, we'll just start with the American ones first. Which did you like better, 4 or 5? Go.
5.
5.
4.
Oh, you should take Samantha's face.
Dear listener, you can't see this, but they're all laughing at me because this is painful.
Samantha's caught in a moment of indecision.
I believe in you, Samantha. You can do it.
I think 5.
I would also say 5. Sorry, Anna. It's fine.
I stand alone.
That's a song.
Just like I stand alone. Well, no, Karen got some historical inaccuracies. So, Karen.
She's the botanist, you're the costumer, we get the whole thing. But you both kind of shared it. Okay, now let's plunk it. Now let's plunk these last two into the overall 5.
I think it definitely goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for me as far as
like the combination to your luggage. Who gives the
yeah,
reference?
exactly. Kylie, how did you know?
That's the combination of my luggage. Spaceballs, anybody?
Yeah, it's still definitely number 1 is my favorite. I still really like 2, but 1 edges out. 3 is good. 4 is good. 5 is that's progression for me. Those are my feelings.
I'm gonna say 1 and 2, then 3, then 5, then 4.
Oh, Kristen, you took mine.
Disagree with me.
You can
Disagree with me. I agreed with
Can you see me here writing notes? Like, I'm writing down numbers and being like, okay, do I like how that looks?
Samantha's like that meme with the woman and like all the math around her, and she's like looking into the middle distance, like puzzled, like
figure out the equation. Yeah.
What's interesting though, Kristen, is that you still packaged 1 and 2 together. I started to do that, and then I thought, no, they're going to give me crap for packaging seasons, so I broke them up and went 2, 1, 3, 5, 4.
You got mine. Yep, because mine is 2, 3. Actually, mine's 2, 3, 1. 5, 4.
Wow, Lori.
I'm sitting here thinking, because I'm reflecting on certain things. I think I go 2, 1, 3, 5, 4. So I think that's along the lines with Kristen and Samantha.
Yeah, close.
Because I packaged kind of 2 and 3 together, but I like 1 on how it was all set up. So we'll see. We'll see how 6 fits in here.
But 3 was the boat season, right?
3 was the boat season.
3 was the boat season.
So to
and
that
we know
end,
your feelings about the boat.
I know, so now I'm rethinking.
So to that end,
2, 1, 5, 4, 3. I don't know. This is too hard, you guys.
no, that's where I am. 2,
4 at
1,
the
5,
bottom.
4, 3. I have 2, 1, 5, 4, 3. The boat season is. I normally like boats, but the boat season was my least favorite season. There was a lot going on, and I felt like there was no Murta. He was gone, so there was just no. That one's 3's at the bottom. I know it's Karen's favorite book, and maybe the book is really good, but I'm not at the. I didn't like 3 as much. So, and 2 is only just a little bit ahead of 1 for me. I see 1 and 2 as the pair. 3 is the
combo.
Yeah. 1 and 2 is the pair. 3 is kind of on its own. 4 and 5 is the pair.
Yep,
So.
I see it that exact same way.
And see, I hated book 2. I didn't like book 2. But season 2 was good. But there's some overlap there, so between certain books.
Ladies, this is just getting so much harder. By the time we get to 6, you might have to retire this portion of the agenda, Kylie.
no.
It's going to be too much.
Oh, no.
I don't know. 6 might go to the top because there's a lot of things that happened that I really enjoyed in the books that brought me back to the books.
This is
In-
our
in
Outlander
books and six.
tradition, Samantha. Every panel gets a specific tradition, and this is the longest catching up series we've ever done because you all want to do it one by one, so ranking is going to be part of your life.
Can you imagine?
I guess I just need the whole Droughtlander to just mentally prepare for having to rank 6 of them.
Fair enough.
There you go. You've got time. Can you imagine, though, talking about more than one season of the show per episode?
No, it was a good call.
There's
I'm
no
not
way.
criticizing you all. That was a very good call.
We didn't even talk about my favorite part of season 5, which is the random bison that flips Brianna over his head. Because I actually don't know if I can swear right now, but my literal reaction when I watched that, when that episode came out, was, what the fuck?
Yeah, that
It's
one will have to be
because
deleted.
It was hunted to death.
I just, and then later in the episode, Claire gives Jamie the hand job of life.
Literally, that was the weirdest part. Yeah, yep.
I forgot that those two things happened in the same episode, and I was rewatching that episode with my roommate last night, who's never watched the show. Her only exposure to it is through my ramblings, and so she watched that with me, and her reaction was also, what the... But then she went to bed before the end of the episode, and so this morning when I talked to her, I was like, I forgot that that's not the only crazy thing that happened in the episode. Later in the episode, Claire gives Jamie the hand job of life, and she just looked at me like, you're making this up. And I was like...
So now this is actually in the books is Jamie becoming aware of the sexual revolution, and Claire brings some knowledge back. Or the French court, have your choice, that he might not have experienced in the French court. But yeah, there's a whole lot in the books about their escapades where Jamie's like, you want to what? Is this even possible? Remember, the Kama Sutra was not well known yet.
It's not the fact that she gives him a hand job, because literally on their wedding night, she does things.
Mm-hmm.
Back in season 1. It's more a particular situation that the hand job takes place in. Where she, thinks
That
he's
he's
dead.
trying to actively die on her.
Yeah.
He's dying, and he stops breathing, and her reaction is to take off all her clothes and give him a hand job. A+ medical reaction, Claire. And when I was telling my roommate about this, she was like, she didn't think to give him, CPR? And I was like, no, she doesn't even attempt CPR. She just goes straight for the hand job. And I was like, they didn't cover this in my CPR training at work.
She got the blood moving, so...
It's the 18th century man back. A full masculine man.
I mean, yeah, I didn't think the bison stampede was all that crazy. They had provoked that one by shooting at him. But the hand job I'll give you.
Have you ever actively been in a bison herd?
No.
Has anybody?
No.
Holy crap, they are some scary animals.
I believe it. I thought
I
they were
have
scary
been,
on the
so
TV.
I knew when they shot at it, I'm like, it's going to go poorly for the humans. Yeah, bison are some nasty piece of work. And if you ever watch YouTube videos of the Yellowstone bison
And the idiots.
Well, this is apparently a trending topic on YouTube.
Yeah.
I mean,
That's what idiots do.
do you know how heavy these animals are?
I don't know, but they look big. They looked big on my television.
They're a minivan.
They're about 2,500 pounds.
Yeah.
They're over a ton. Think moose attitude, if you've ever encountered a moose. Or am I the only worldly one that has encountered some weird wildlife?
I've not met all of these animals in person, no.
Yeah.
I grew up in the middle of the woods, so there's that.
I've been to a zoo. About as much as I can.
I grew up on a farm.
Okay.
Yeah, I grew up on a farm with Angus, and Angus but they're only about 1,200 pounds.
Yeah.
But I've gone through Yellowstone and had to stop and let the herd, and all these people I'm like, that's far enough, I know they're nasty pieces of work when provoked, especially with babies. But I like the interactions with the wildlife, because if it didn't happen on the show, you wouldn't realize how close the wildlife really was to these people's homes and the bison, And that's exactly what they do. They flip you right over the back and then trample you to death.
I just love, too, that they do the whole, Clint Eastwood eyes thing, where you get, a close-up of its eyes, and you, stare into this bison's soul. You have a moment with the bison, and then it dies.
Wow.
It just, me as a viewer, I think that the reason that I had the reaction that I did is that from a storytelling aspect, it felt disconnected from the part of the story that whereas the bison were actually happening. I feel like it would have made a little bit more sense if that had happened with one of the characters that were out there hunting them. But because from my perspective, I'm watching it and I'm they're hanging out at the homestead and oh no, it's a bison, it's here, and then there's this moment of big danger, high stakes, and then it's over.
Okay, so the natives that have lived there for a while would have known better than to provoke the bison, but Brianna doesn't know this. That's why she got flipped ass over tea kettle. She had no idea that one shot doesn't down these animals, especially from the musket of that era, that it takes multiple. And, they're all like, whoa, we ain't messing with the bison, but she's like, yeah, poof.
Well, and
oh, crap.
Yeah, just to kind of clarify what Anna's saying, it's not Bree that shoots it, it's Jamie. But that's right. Way back on, deep in the middle of the woods by the snake that bites him. And the only reason she provokes him is because she's trying to get him away from stampeding Jemmy, who's on the ground, by Lizzie.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, I get what you're saying.
That this bison makes it from all which the rest of the episode, since it takes so long for Roger and Jamie to get back to the group, we know that was a long way away. The fact that this bison happens upon, the odds. What are the odds?
Actually, very good. There were herds of thousands of these on the Appalachian side.
I think she was talking about the one that got shot. It was very lucky that the one that got shot happened to find the farm homestead.
That particular bison.
Wander through the farm.
He wanders to that particular farm.
I got it now. Sorry.
That farm.
Especially since they're at the center of the ridge, whereas we always see the pan out away from... Mm-hmm. And the settler camps and stuff are further out, so you think they would have trampled the settler camps first.
And the fact that they don't really talk about it after it happens, I get that a lot happens in that episode, but they're never oh hey, Brianna got flipped over a bison today,
and she recovered very quickly
other
from
crazy
her.
Things happened.
She recovered pretty quickly from her quote ass over tea kettle acrobatics.
Mm-hmm. Anna Laura, have you grown up on a farm?
I grew up in the middle of the woods. I grew up in a cabin in the woods.
Okay. Well, no. Why I ask is. I wanted a point of clarification because wood life is different than farm life, where you get to know the animals and their personalities. And I'm just trying to put your comments in a context for me.
I mean, yeah. We didn't have food animals at my house. We had neighbors who had livestock. But yeah, at my house we had some both indoor and outdoor pets. And then, of course, the various woodland creatures that, visited us.
Okay, so you've never gone cow tipping. Got it.
No, I was invited
we have.
I was invited multiple times, but I declined.
Well, and that's a good thing. But if you've never been on the angry end of a steer, a bull, and I have been, they remember. Just saying. Animals do remember things that happen to them.
Fair enough. Okay, it's time to... and we'll segue.
Okay, I have led on to a little more of my life than probably people want to know.
No, but it's time to ask the all-important million-dollar questions, especially since we're all caught up. And there's a brand new season, and I'm no longer disadvantaged in this question. First of all, are you going to keep watching?
Yes.
Yes.
Very much so, yes.
Like I said earlier, I will probably continue watching. They're on progressively thinner ice for me, and I don't want to pay to watch it. But yeah, I will probably, 60% chance I will watch season 6.
And Kristen, you said yes?
I said yes.
Okay.
Yes, enthusiastically.
Okay. Now, at the end of season 5, would you say you would recommend Outlander to others? Why or why not?
Yes.
I just recommended it to my mom.
That counts.
So it'd be awkward to talk to her about it, but
Yes, I would recommend it because I like the way they treat history as something real. The real people living their lives, and history is what happens around them. I like the way they treat it. So yes, I would still recommend it.
That's so poignant, Karen.
yeah, I really like that.
Yeah, that's true. I think if we're talking specifically, would I recommend season 5? I would, with a big old asterisk, because at that point, to watch season 5, you assume that someone has watched seasons 1 through 4, so they're already somewhat invested. However, because of the more problematic elements, I would definitely caution them, especially if depictions of sexual assault is going to be in any way traumatic for them to watch.
Yes, with, I think, the same disclaimer I offered for season 4 of I would only recommend it to a specific type of viewer. It wouldn't be a blanket recommendation.
So considering most of my friends are historical reenactors, of course, they all watch it. So enthusiastic, yes. I've had those uncomfortable conversations with my mom because up until recently, my mom did watch the show and she would call me, and she was an avid reader of the book, so she knew what was going on. So yes, I would actively recommend the show.
I would also actually still recommend it. I probably would throw in a little bit of an asterisk as well regarding the violence and the assaults. I mean, I think we're in a very weird time where not everybody's going to handle those things as well as other people, which I think has always been true. But I think I would couch this or contextualize this by saying Outlander's on a premium network, so you're going to get everything, number one. I mean, anything that's HBO, Showtime, Stars, Encore, etc., they're not going to hold back, and I would say that. And I would say that, they also do all of the everything historically pretty accurate with some quibbles. But I think this has, now that I've watched it, and I know that Kristen was one of the ones particularly saying, why aren't you watching this? She usually does this with a handful of shows. Why aren't you watching X yet? And Outlander was one of them. And I see why now. And I think that I know enough of the people that, the people around me tend to be big sci-fi fantasy fans, and I would actually throw this into the fantasy genre. I know it's historical fantasy, and that just adds another layer, so that's going to bring in the historical parts. But the fantasy piece of it, I think, would make me recommend it to a lot more people. Men and women, it doesn't matter, non-binary. If you like this sort of thing, I would say watch it. I mean, I think it's a nice story so far. It's a big journey, and the character moments are worth it. All of the character moments are worth it. The events might be hard at times, but all of the character moments are worth it. And I'm still interested to see where it goes. I know what's going to happen with the American Revolution. I know how that ends, but I'm interested to see where it goes, So how do we get there from these characters' perspectives? There's a lot that still can be told. I said that multiple times. There's a lot of story left to tell, which explains why Diana's still writing books, and probably why they will not finish the series until they have some kind of understanding with her as far as where they can and should end versus where she will and can end. Because I don't see Stars going out voluntarily on this show. I think this is their big show, And I think it's very, very popular, and I think that people still want to see it. So that's a long answer to say, yes, I would recommend it. So at this time, other than what we've already said, answered, offered, talked about, is there anything else you want to cover about Season 5 or what you hope to see in Season 6?
One thing we didn't talk about was, even though they swooped in Murtaugh to have that relationship with Jocasta instead of Ulysses, there still was sort of that love appreciation moment between the two of them when he saved her life.
Yeah.
And I liked how they then protected him and he was out in that branch shack in the woods.
Branch shack.
And went on with Lord John. So that was this season had a lot of good, like, small moments like that.
Branch shack is the new technical term and hashtag on this episode. Hashtag branch shack.
Not hashtag hand job of life.
Okay, that one too. We're not limited.
Not a competition, Anna Laura.
Well, one of the interesting things about episode 12 that we kind of missed was at 1960s house with all the characters, there were a ton of Easter eggs.
I started
Yeah?
to see some things, and I was like, "Is that?" But it was all
Yes.
going so fast that I was like, and I was still reacting to the fact that it was her safe place, that it never landed fully in my brain.
I didn't notice it at all the first time I saw it. I just rewatched it again last night, and that's when I started picking things up. The blue vase from the very first episode
That's the one
is
I
in
saw.
there.
Yep.
The painting she's looking at on the wall is a painting of the house at Fraser's Ridge. There's a giant sundial on the wall, or it looks like a remonstrance, which is used in the Catholic Church for adoration of the host. There, the orange, which goes back to her interaction with King Louis. And there's even in young Ian's military uniform, there are Indian insignia on his uniform, indicating Mohawk tribe. And when Marcelly and Fergus are talking about naming their new baby, they talk about, should it be James or Ian, or how about Ringo? So all these weird little things that get thrown in that episode. The fact that Jamie, everybody's wearing 1960s clothes, except Jamie's wearing something very similar to what he wore in the first episode. Mm-hmm. And he raps, they repeat certain phrases from previous episodes. He wraps a blanket around her and he says, "You're shaking so hard, you're making my teeth chatter." And then the blanket turns into his plaid. So there's all kinds of weird, interesting little things that they threw into that episode. First time I saw it, I was just I thought it was very jarring because it kept going back and forth, and I realized it was her safe place, but I wasn't catching all of the symbolism they were throwing into it. And so watching it last night, I was kind of picking up some things. The policemen who come to the door, that's Lionel Brown and Sergeant Hodgepile in police uniforms. So there's all kinds of weird Easter eggs in that whole scene that are really kind of interesting to look at if you could just take that piece away from the trauma of the rest of the things going on. But just an interesting FYI.
That's why I keep thinking it's more foreshadowy than just symbolic.
Maybe.
Okay.
I have no information, so I don't know. Maybe. One fun thing. So I read an article that a woman who writes for Oprah magazine, ironically, again, Google, wonderful thing. She did a set tour when they were filming season 5. She went over and watched some stuff. And she said one of the cool things is how much everything gets reused, because they have these just gigantic warehouses. So I'm not surprised, like, how Karen was saying there was like the vase and other things that they've used before popped up. Well, they still have them all in storage, so that's cool. But one of the neat things is that all of the fiery crosses, or all the crosses that they had shown, they were actually made by Jamie, or Sam, is it Hewen?
Mm-hmm.
His uncle built those for the show, which I thought was just kind of neat. Like,
neat.
His uncle was so cool, and he built all the crosses that they would then burn or keep in storage to have the unburnt versions. But yeah, it was just kind of a fun article where they talked about that kind of stuff and how they reused, like, the Boston apartment, everything, all the materials they built for that then became, like, something else in another scene. And I don't know. I'm always fascinated by the behind the scenes stuff for television. So it was a nice article to read.
It's important to note that Katrina and Sam were promoted to producer for season 5, which is partially longevity, but probably partially negotiated. And now it's interesting to know that Sam's uncle is up there in the
props department.
Yeah. Props department, construction. Anything else you want to mention about season 5 or what you hope to see in season 6?
New characters and some renewal of old characters that come back.
Well,
They're
that's
really
a
in the
bomb
revolution.
to drop.
You are such a cagey bunch, I tell ya.
He told us no spoilers.
And I hold
It
to
was
it.
no spoiler.
No, it wasn't. No, I wasn't. I know. Samantha's...
Tone of voice.
Yeah. Samantha says cagey. Karen said no spoilers, so it wasn't an attack.
I mean, full transparency, I read all the books. I don't remember probably 90% of it because I read them so fast. So it's not like I know something in what you're saying. It's just the tone of voice that's so like, aha.
There is that. Well, I feel that we have talked everything we can talk about Outlander to date. So first I want to say congratulations, ladies. You have caught up. Or you've made me catch up, whichever works for you. And what I'd also like to do is thank Samantha and Anna Laura and Lori and Kristen and Karen for joining me to talk about Outlander Season 5 and really Seasons 1 through 5. But since we've done the hard work of catching up, I of course now got to roll the credits. Couch Potatoes Unite! Exclamation Point was produced by Back Pocket Productions, run by yours truly, the Chief Couch Potato, which is really another way of saying executively produced by me, Kylie Piette. My associate producers are Krista Pennington and Selene Rezmer. I edit this podcast, and our logo is by Rebecca Wallace. Our marketing graphic artist is Krista. Our theme song was written by Sarah Milbratz and sung by Sarah, Amy McDaniel, and Kels Rezmer. Kels played the keyboard, Ian McDonough played the bass, Christian Somerville played the guitar, and the whole shebang was engineered by Kyle Aspinall and Christian. We hail from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Please, if you like what you hear, take the time to rate us, give us stars, provide comments, or review us wherever you get your podcasts. Apple, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Amazon are just a few of the places you can find us, but we're also on YouTube. We have our website, and we're now on Patreon at patreon.com/couchpotatoesunite. If you really love us, pledge your support by becoming one of our United Couch Potatoes as we grow our little sofa-populated corner of the world. Otherwise, feel free to tell us how we're doing, what we should add, subtract, keep, or toss. You know how it goes. And if you have suggestions for shows we might consider, contact us at our website where we have a guest book, by email at couchpotatoesunitepodcast@gmail.com, our Facebook, our Twitter at CPU Podcast, our Instagram at Couch Potatoes Unite, our Patreon, or wherever you get your podcasts. Though, of course, we add new and old shows to chat about around the water cooler all the time, and always have new episodes coming down the pipe. Just listen to our intros. If you miss old episodes or want to know in general what shows we cover, just search for us. Find us wherever you do searchable things on the internet. Don't forget that exclamation point, or contact us via our website, our email, our social media accounts, and our Patreon to stay up on all the new events and episodes by our humble little podcast, Couch Potatoes Unite! Exclamation point. Until the next time, the first 3 seasons of Outlander are available to stream on Netflix, our unofficial non-sponsor who doesn't give us enough money for saying their name, while seasons 4 and 5 are available through a subscription to Starz, either directly or via add-on to outlets like Amazon Prime. In the meantime, our Outlander panel will convert to one of our regular water cooler panels and will next reconvene following the finale of Season 6, the premiere date of which has not yet been announced due to delays caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. So until next time, until next episode, new episodes are published every Wednesday. Keep listening, keep watching, stay tuned!
Bye.
Bye!